We're going to talk about some really cool stuff in terms of what these video tools can do. These little plugins that install in your browser, and they basically let you simultaneously record what's going on your screen. So when I think of training, there are so many different opportunities that you can use for this.
Let's say you're a lawyer. You can use this for, walking through very similarly. Like, this is contracts. These are things we want to call out. Like, we're asking you for signatures here. Let's say you're in HR. You're somebody who you need to explain something in payroll to somebody.
The guys out on the job sites are just taking a video on their phone, and it gets loaded back into like the delivered receipt to the client. And it's like, oh, this is what we did. We mowed, trimmed, edged, and did this mulch. And people love that stuff.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Next Gen Strategies podcast. As always, joining me today is my co-host, Tyler Davis. I'm Grant Covault, and we are super excited to be diving into a lot in this episode, actually. But we're going to be talking all about video and the importance of video, whether you're using it in sales or marketing or in operations or in HR. I mean, there's just so many ways you can be using video nowadays. And so, Tyler, would you tell them a little bit about just some tools that we'll be kind of briefly discussing? And yeah, I can do that.
So in the concept of video, you could go a million different ways. So we're kind of narrowing the focus down to these video tools that are out there now that let you record not only yourself, but also what's going on your screen when you're using a computer. And there are two popular products. And the reason we came up with these is because I use one and Grant uses one. Mm-hmm. The product that I use is called Loom. And then the product that Grant uses is called Vidyard, which that one's spelled Vidyard.
Vidyard.
Yeah. So what they are inherently are just these little plugins that install in your browser, and they basically let you simultaneously record what's going on your screen yourself. And it gives you all these different customization tools that you can use to do a lot of different things. So I think what we're going to get into is the kind of applications that we think are things that you should start using right now that are really going to benefit your business.
Yeah, and one of the really cool things, and by the way, we're going to link to all of this in the wherever you're getting your podcast, right? So we're going to make sure you guys have the ability to go find things online and go look them up. One of the reasons why we really like this too, and I'll let you kind of jump in, to kind of how you're using it in a second here. They're free.
Yeah.
And neither one of us are like the absolute, creative video editors or anything like that. Like, they are meant for people who don't necessarily have like video skills or whatever to be able to use. So that's one of the reasons why we're also going to make these recommendations. So there you go.
Yeah, I was just going to kick it off. The first one that I think of that I don't think is talked about often, but is using these types of tools as a training resource. Mm-hmm. So whether you have staff or not, sometimes it's nice to build this. If say you don't have staff, it's nice to build a training bank for yourself, because a lot of us are doing things that we have to do again 6 months later. And you're like, how in the heck did I do that? So what I think about this is that you can leave trails behind you with these videos, because since you're recording your own screen, you can record your own screen and it shows you where your cursor is going, what you're clicking. You can leave audible remarks. When you speak, it leaves transcripts. It does a lot of crazy things that it just uses the technology in the background to do. They're throwing AI into it now to do all types of great things. So when I think of training, there are so many different opportunities that you can use for this. And from my perspective, I do a lot of technical work, whether it's with something like QuickBooks or it's with a tax return or something like that. And there's always very specific ways to do things. And you can spend a lot of time spinning your wheels trying to figure out how to interface with, say, like a website, a piece of software, something like that. So if you have a challenging thing that you're doing pretty often, you can just record yourself do it. And then you have that as a tool in the background to use the next time you do it. It's a tool that you can give to a new staff. Like, you could build out a complete library of how we do something from start to finish. And then that can be reused over and over again and updated upon frequently. So I really like that, leaving those trails behind for myself. And then if I do ever need to give it to a staff, I can do that. So you'll see, you and I attended a trade show where we've seen video get really popular there from training perspectives, right?
Yep.
And the technology is moving so fast, but what we saw was, it's not one of these tools, but it was an iPad where they were recording in a manufacturing setting of how this machine operated. And then the technology was able to overlay onto that so that when they got new employees, they were able to just watch this video and it layered in real time the instructions on how to do something on the product they're seeing in front of themselves. process.
Yep.
So this application can be used for professional services. You can also use video. Say it's not one of these tools, but you're in a manufacturing setting. There are a lot of other tools out there that you can use to capture video to train people on processes that you have wherever you're working.
Yeah, I think most people are, they're visual people, right? So, they don't want to necessarily hear a bunch of training like audibly. But if you can show them and let them see something and maybe even go through, step by step with it, like that's really important. And like you just said, once you have these things developed, like they can live wherever you want them to live. And, if you're somebody who is constantly bringing on new people, or let's say maybe you have interns that you work with and like, you just know they're going to switch out every couple of semesters. Like it's so easy to do some step-by-step instructions. And you can even customize them a little bit too, right? So let's say, for example, you've got a process for using a project management system. And, maybe there's a certain way that, you set up projects and you save them in folders, et cetera. But, sometimes those can change, or you might want to show, somebody something very specific. Like you can build out a library of those things. And it's so easy to just click. And by the way, you don't have to necessarily save them to the computer. It's all saved to the cloud.
Yeah.
So they're all link accessible. You can send them easily through email. You can have your face on it and personalize it if you want. And if you don't want to do that, like most people, you can just share the screen and have your voice recording it as you go through it. And I will say too, I'm typically using Google Chrome. I don't know from a browser standpoint what you're using, but I know they work on a majority of them because I've heard from multiple different folks. Security is pretty good with them too. Like I haven't heard anything major from that, at least from our IT friends that we have. So.
Yeah. Even from my perspective, like I use them to review tax returns, and you're able to put layers of protection on there to help keep them encrypted and protected. So it does have those extra security layers. And we're going to talk about some really cool stuff in terms of what these video tools can do. I just did not want to miss out on training because, like you said, people are visual learners. You got to imagine the difference between handing someone a manual on how to do something and then a 12-part video series on it that physically shows them in real world application how they would do that. That's going to be so much more efficient. It's going to go so much quicker for them. Your staff are going to relate to that so much easier. It's an incredible tool.
Yeah, absolutely. When you can combine the audio and the visual, like it's a big deal. So you mentioned training. There's another application I want to talk about as well, which is kind of the sales and marketing side of things. Again, you can imagine what are all the different ways that you could potentially use this for sales and marketing. And, marketing, of course, right? You can always use like cell phone video to take pictures for social media and stuff, but that's not really what we're getting at here. This is a whole nother kind of way to potentially get an entrance. And I just read the statistic kind of before we hopped on here today. And I think right now, emails and LinkedIn messages that have some type of video or reference of video through a link, their open rates, I believe, are depending on how you're sending it, between 50 and 60% higher. That's a big deal, right? If you send something that has a 50 to 60% more ability for somebody, or, percent chance that they're going to open something, like that's a big deal. There's a lot of noise out in the world right now. And so to be able to have a way to kind of cut that through and be authentic and unique, it's important. You got to be able to do that. So one of the things that, and I'll just kind of start just from like the sales side thing. So kind of first off, right, like prospecting. So whether you're prospecting and you're a service-based business, maybe you're a solopreneur, maybe you're somebody in manufacturing, you've got a sales team, prospecting and using video is really important because one of the things that you can do, one of the things that I've done is, let's say, for example, right, you're reaching out to, I'm reaching out to Davis Accounting and Tax, right? DAT. So I'm reaching out to you and maybe I'm like, hey, I think it'd be great for me to be able to do some marketing work for you. One of the things I might do is pull up your website. And I might do a Vidyard video of me walking through your website. Like, hey, it looks like, you have X amount of staff and you looks like you do this, and this. And this is where I think there's some areas for me to really help you out, Tyler. I would love to have the opportunity to sit down with you, talk through some things I see that you might be able to improve on. Would love to hear from you, right? 30-second video, quick, probably, you've probably got a minute or two in editing it, and I can then send that to you. And I might also send somebody else in your organization. I might not even just be you, might be somebody else.
So you're saying basically this is not where you just take a canned video of your product or service and you're sending it to people, but you're using this tool because it's very easy because you're probably doing this anyhow when you're looking at a prospect. You want to learn more about them. You're just snagging a video with audio to send to them that's custom based on what you're looking at. It's part of probably your workflow anyhow in terms of sales and marketing. But then you also have the opportunity for them to see your face, your voice and them right there. So it just seems like it's more, I guess, personal for them, right? Okay.
No, that's exactly right. And here's the thing, like most people, especially if you're in sales and you're like majorly in sales, like you're usually spending, or you should be spending, a couple minutes before you reach out to a prospect anyway, right? So if you're going to dial a phone, you're going to leave a voicemail, like you're going to have already kind of researched that prospect before you kind of hop on. So why not just expedite it as you're doing, after you do a little bit of that research? If you can leave a voicemail, you can take a quick video.
Right.
Like
okay, that makes sense.
It's a very similar thing.
So I've used these tools. I've never actually used the tool to do it that way in terms of prospecting, but I've used the tool when I'm like deeper into a conversation with somebody and like I'm delivering the actual proposal.
Yep.
So rather than me just sending them, I'm sure you have thoughts about this, but I've read stuff too in terms of like proposals get like lost in email. And we'll probably have a whole series on like proposal tools. Don't get me wrong. But I've used it to say, hey, here's your proposal link. But so what's cool about, I don't know how Vidyard is, but Loom, I can send this like GIF that comes in the email and it basically shows the video right away. And I'm like, just watch this because I'm stepping through the proposal. Because then I can because I'll have my contract or my engagement letter in there and then I can walk it through so it doesn't seem like they're getting this big block of text and I can explain this is why this is here and all that. And I've had a lot of luck with that because people go just straight to the video.
Yeah, and that is I'm glad you said that is such an important thing. Like after prospecting, when you've got those proposals, because for two things, one, you can control the narrative, right? So just like you just said, like you could put something in your words so that you don't not leaving certain things up in like a contract for for somebody else to try and interpret. And you can also say, as part of that email follow-up, like, hey, maybe this is going to the CFO, the CEO, and 2 or 3 other people. Maybe the CFO cares about, they don't care about why you put the proposal together and all the things that's going to happen with it. They want to know how much is it and tell me about the cost details and payment. You can tell them in that video or in the email follow-up, say, hey, skip to the 5-minute mark because that's when I talk about cost. But maybe the other person, they care more about like the procedure piece of it. And so you can say, hey, like this part might be more for you. It's like, there's just so many ways you can customize that depending on what you're selling.
That makes sense. I've just coming back to that is a good idea in terms of using these products for your first kind of touches with potential clients. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I'll add one more layer I just thought of just because we had just talked about training. So if you're a sales manager or if you're a person who's just starting to bring on sales folks in your organization, you might want the as part of a training resource or like hey, like what can we improve? You could also make sure like if you're sending these video proposals along, of course, the best is to do things in person or be able to do it on a live call. But if you can't do that, if you're a sales manager, have your business development people under you, like copy them so that they can kind of see and listen and give you feedback on like, hey, this might be a good opportunity to do something a little bit differently next time, or oh, you're a little bit long-winded here, or maybe, hey, you forgot to mention this, but this is a really, really important value piece. So that actually, if you're training salespeople, it actually gives an opportunity to be even better there too.
You could handpick out the best ones that you've done before by your best salesman is saying these are like ideally how we do this, right? That makes sense.
Yeah. And it's just crazy. And because I'm on the marketing side of things, like I'm oftentimes working with marketing and sales folks at other organizations, people just don't do it. They just won't. And so no matter how much these tools are out there, they're free. It's just a lot of organizations still aren't using them. And so it's honestly a differentiator for your organization to be like, wow, I just got a video email from this guy or girl who was walking through things, laying them out for me. They took the time and effort to do this. And oh, by the way, I was super busy. I knew I couldn't get on a call with them today, but now at night I can jump on, read the video or look at the video real quick. Boom.
Yeah. And we can kind of put this out here, even though we might do more episodes on it. If we're not doing proposals in person, we're usually using some type of another piece of software to help us send proposals that can capture signatures or payment information and all that fun stuff. So do you have any more thoughts or best practices in terms of, you talked about, how you may, like an example of how you were going to record a video for prospecting, but we were at the part where you're sending a contract or a proposal. What do you think about in terms of like what you should be covering? You talked a little bit about, you could point out sections for the right people, but are you going through that thing and reading it line by line, or are you just thinking about your client and thinking about the areas where maybe they want to hear more?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the situation, right? Like so if, like, for me, my proposals are usually not like super in depth. So one of the things that I will often do is I might send, like, if I am sending a longer proposal, like I won't necessarily go through everything, but I'll go through and do call outs, right? So I might say, like, here's the intro piece of this. Here's kind of a summary of this first piece, but what you'll care about, and as you're reading through, like, really call out the certain pieces that may be confusing to somebody or that you might want to reiterate as a major differentiator. So I try to do a little bit more as a summary because people can read.
Yeah.
Right. And then usually if I'm sending a video through, like, I always make sure, like, there's a PDF attachment, or if I'm using like a link for like a Quiller proposal or Adobe or something like that.
Yeah. Because I've thought about this, kind of touches back to the scaling episodes, but like you really want to be high touch with your sales for the most part, unless your type of your business is, you aren't high touch and you're doing like a lot of volume.
Sure.
But what this can do is it's an efficient way of doing this because it eliminates questions. Like you said before, you can kind of anticipate the areas that the individuals you're sending it to are going to look at. And,
right.
And you can almost anticipate some of the questions they may have. So you could spend time in that video explaining it over words and not text. Like the context is there, the emotions there. So it could eliminate how many back and forths.
Yeah.
After that.
And that's a really good point. I think that's kind of the other piece I want to touch on is, there's that back and forth sometimes in the proposal process, but then oftentimes, like, if you're working with somebody, again, whether you're a service-based industry or you're a manufacturer or whoever, the other piece of that is you're going to have to onboard this client at some point in time too, right? And so to be able to have a way, let's say you get through the proposal piece and you're like, okay, so now I need to collect something from this client, right? And most service providers have to have some type of onboarding process. And so one of the really easy things to do is, let's say, for example, right, you send them a form and they need to fill out this form. Well, rather than sending them this really lengthy form where you're just hoping that they understand what you're asking them for and that they're going to get you these things, you can send a video with that form and say, hey, you know what? Thank you very much for, signing on with me today. I just want to quickly, kind of quick walk you through this form and give you a little bit more context to what I'm looking for here. And so you can then go through that form with them. Again, high touch, high personalized way to do this. And you don't have to get on a meeting with them. And trust me, that client will love not having to always get on a meeting to go through things as well.
And I've done that too, because with my business, a lot of times we have to get access to accounts. I'm sure that you have to do the same thing.
Exactly.
So I'm doing a video. Here you go. This is how you add me as an accountant on QuickBooks. Well, I've already made that video. Now I can reuse it 50 times. This is how to add me to your, Ohio Business Gateway account for sales tax. It's the same thing over and over again. Now I got an onboarding library of send these all out, and then they get to do it when they want to do it. And they have the instructions on how to do it. Like you said, instead of, well, let's schedule for next Tuesday when we can all finally connect to do this. That makes a lot of sense.
And that's a good point too. Like some things, I don't want to get it confused either. Like sometimes you want it to be very personal to a certain situation, but to your point, like if there's something that just doesn't change, if it's something with a government website or something where you're like, I don't need to record a video for this every single time. Like I can just record one generally. And I don't, have to address it to somebody. Like, build your library. Like just what you said, you do the same thing you're doing for training. Like you can do that exact same thing for, for when you're onboarding them. So
that makes a lot of sense. And I think that kind of leads to this more technical work side of things. And this might not apply to folks that are not in maybe professional services, certainly, but I can talk a little bit more about video in terms of some of the other services where it's more in person or it's more manufacturing. But I use these tools probably most out of anything to deliver technical work to people, because I work with complicated things. Like people come to me because accounting and taxes are complicated and they don't want to deal with it. But there's a lot of education I have to do because I need them to understand it. So I'm able to use these videos to make complicated things make more sense. Like the simple things are, like when I do a tax return, I do a Loom video of the tax return, and I, the one I can always come up to or think about is that on the first page of the 1040, there's a few lines down, there's adjusted gross income. And I would say, hey, here's your AGI. You've probably heard of that before because like a banker's asked you for it, or it's like on a government grant program, like application on a FAFSA thing or something. I was like, that's what AGI is. And I pointed out and highlight it. And how many people go, I never knew where AGI was on the tax return. And now they know it's on line 11 or whatever it is, right? So Same thing.
I hate that you know that it's on line. Is it on line 11?
We'll
we're going to check that when we're done. If that's on not line 11, you need to.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but
anyway,
I've done it a ton too because I work with bookkeepers a lot. So, if I'm working for somebody and we're doing more of a high level service and I have a bookkeeper, I can drop in and go. They can follow me do stuff. And that is so valuable for this because it's kind of like the training thing we talked about, but I'm delivering a very technical thing to them that now they have and can reuse. Because I might show you how to do a certain journal entry and then you'll have to do it again 3 months from now. And that's still out there. So I use it so much for delivering complicated things to people in a way that's easy to understand. So in any type of professional service, you can use that to just show your deliverables.
And that's exactly, so my brain's going on a couple different places right now. You just nailed a lot of different things for like the CPAs and stuff, right? So I just want to just give some examples to the top of my head, right? So, if let's say you're a lawyer, or you're a paralegal or somebody working in a law firm, like you can use this for, walking through very similar, like this is contracts, these are things we want to call out. Like we're asking you for signatures here. This is what this is. Let's say you're in HR. You're somebody who you need to explain something in payroll to somebody, or maybe you're walking through some compliance matters, right? So like that's kind of got an HR application. IT. Oh my goodness, they would probably be about as close as you can.
And like you say, you're just an insurance agent too. When you get your stack of documents for when you get some type of insurance, they could go straight to where the meat is and say, here's your covered values. Here's all this and that. Because you've seen those before. You're like, well, where is it? You're trying to figure it out. But there are so many other applications that may not be these tools. Like if you are a landscaping company, right? I've seen this and I think it's awesome where like after jobs are done, the guys out on the job sites are just taking a video on their phone and that gets loaded back into like the delivered receipt to the client. And it's like, oh, this is what we did. We mowed, trimmed, edged, and did this mulch. And people love that stuff because you may not be there and they get to see it. And anytime I've gotten a review, I always hear some level of feedback about the video that you do is great. So there's so many different creative ways you could think about adding video to some level of a deliverable to your client or with a product that you have that's pretty impactful. The other thing I was going to say too is that you want to pay attention to the demographic of your clients because like what I'm seeing with a lot of like the millennials and older Gen Zs is they love this stuff because they don't want to leave their house. They don't want to go to this buttoned up meeting and feel like they're intimidated by someone or this or that. So like they love getting these videos because they're just doing this stuff in their pajamas from their couch. And that can be the differentiator between you and another competitor because they don't have to schedule this meeting during business hours with you to get these things and understand it. You're just firing it off to them and they get to use it when it works for them and in any setting that they want to be in. So that's really nice.
Yeah, 100%. We'll see. I think we'll probably do some more pods around video or how to use phones. Cause like there's just so many different things, but, I think just to kind of quickly recap for everybody here. So, again, our favorite tools that we use, you use Loom. I use Vidyard more often. Both of them very similar. The browser extensions. Again, we're going to have URLs to those different websites on there. They're both great. And they both have versions that are free that you can get started with, that you can use for 95% of the things. If you need things for a little bit more, more storage or more ways to, cut and dice them. There are some paid versions, but honestly, even the paid versions are like $10-15 a month. I don't even know if it's that much.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are the two that we highly recommend. There's other ones out there. If you have questions on any of them, we're like, hey, I found this one from whoever, shoot it our way. Like we'll give you our feedback or test it out ourselves. So those are kind of the tools we're talking about. Again, from an application standpoint, you got them for training, right? So all the different things, creating kind of a standard operating procedures to, being able to onboard new people, all the different things that happen with training, sales, marketing, prospecting. It's harder than heck to get in front of folks nowadays. So to be able to have something that's differentiating, it can really help, bring up those opens for you. And if you have a sales team, personalize the touch all the way through to when you deliver a proposal and then all the way through to the client onboarding piece. Again, you can control the narrative. You have the ability to really personalize those touches. And then, of course, the last piece we touched on is just the delivery elements of sales, whether you're in a service-based business like marketing or accounting or IT or human resources or anything else. And we even touched on, non-service-based resources. Again, use these tools. They're at your disposal. And there's a lot of people out there who, you can get support from, you can check out, again, contact us. We're like, well, we're happy to kind of show you how we use it. And there's other things you can find online as well. LinkedIn, people doing forums with them as well. So, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. And we look forward to another episode. Follow, if you're not already, I want to plug this piece in here. I'm going to forget. If you're not already, subscribe, like our podcast, whether you're checking us out on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, subscribe, follow us along. And we look forward to talking to you on the next episode. Thanks. Thanks again for joining us today on the Next Gen Strategies podcast.
Be sure to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you really enjoyed it, give us a share on any of your favorite social media channels.
And don't forget to leave us a review.